please welcome Jules Polonetsky.
Hey everybody, thanks for making it here today. This is not a group that fears viruses. You fight them in every way. So I asked whether anybody had been making virus jokes to the security community, and they said nobody has. So apologies if it's been an obvious tie-in for all of you. But kudos to all of you who are here and who are actually paying attention to privacy today in the midst of a security conference. A couple of years ago, there were no privacy panels at an RSA or at many of the other security conferences, and it's really just been the last couple of years where I think these two communities have realized that they really are part and parcel, right, in more than some of the obvious ways, right? Anybody who works in privacy, who introduces themselves, right away people say to you, oh, you're keeping the data safe. And you're like, no, that's not exactly what I do. And they want to know what the difference is, right? And so in some ways, the difference is that those of you who work in security are worried about the bad folks getting the data. And those of us who work in privacy are worried about what the good folks, or at least the people who have the data and have permissions to use it, are actually doing with it. Are they actually doing things that are legal? Are they doing things that are moral? Are they doing things that are trustworthy? Are they doing things that are ethical? And those are very different things. And for many years, the privacy and security folks were maybe more adversaries than friends. I remember when I was the chief privacy officer many years ago at DoubleClick, I was scared of the security folks. I was sort of a lawyer and a policy person, and they were kind of, hardcore tech folks. I wanted us to not have data because I was going to have to explain, why we had it and what were we doing with it and were we going to lose it. And they wanted to keep logs. They needed information for forensic purposes. And they were worried about monitoring our employee networks for fear that data would be going out. And I was worried about violating laws in Germany or having our employees be upset because we were monitoring their behavior. So more often than not, the interactions we had were not super friendly and not super positive. But I think, frankly, what we've all learned over the last couple of years, especially as privacy folks have started working on programs to support access to data, to support deletion of data, the intersection is clear, it's obvious, and I think now we're certainly talking about partners. All right. I promised that this talk would be about privacy as a human right. And when I mean this, I don't mean this just in sort of a moral way, right? Oh, it's important, it's a human right. What does it mean for people actually working with data, people monitoring data, people analyzing data, people selling data? What does it mean to actually be thinking about privacy as a human right, right? Tim Cook. Privacy is a human right. Satya Nadella, probably a dozen other CEOs, have prominently declared that privacy is a human right. So let's jump into it a little bit. And I'm going to try to walk a little bit through some of my early days, because I think some of these issues, as I've grown up in working in privacy for 20 years, have developed, and I've had either the good or misfortune to be connected and working on some of those. I've been a congressional staffer and now Senator Chuck Schumer and colleague of mine who worked with me. He moved on. I went and got elected to the state legislature, and he went and he moved on to some company called DoubleClick. And I didn't know much about that. And I knew there was this big sign in Manhattan, and it said, "DoubleClick welcomes you to Silicon Alley." And this was a brilliant marketing thing, because obviously there is no alley that is Silicon Alley, and there is no one area that is even the Silicon Alley community, and there certainly wasn't back then. But the marketers at DoubleClick realized that media needed somewhere to photograph, and so they put up this great big sign, sponsored by DoubleClick. And so I knew, oh, DoubleClick, something to do with .com of some sort. I ended up becoming the Consumer Affairs Commissioner for New York City, working on enforcing the consumer protection laws. And as I think many of you know, we don't have real significant comprehensive privacy law in this country, right? We have consumer protection law. The law says, and we've got this at a federal level. When I was Consumer Affairs Commissioner, I got to enforce it at a city level. Many states have it. And the law basically says, and these are all very similar, you can't deceive people and you can't do things that are unfair, right? So if I don't tell you about what I'm doing with your data and I do something that seems unpleasant, the Attorney General, the Federal Trade Commission, I can bring an action against you under this consumer protection law. So we've kind of levered privacy into consumer protection law. But it's not a perfect fit, because as long as I'm not really deceiving you, if I say something about it and you don't pay attention, it's not really terrible, I just might maybe do something creepy or market to you in some way that's unpleasant, you don't have a clear right to say, you don't have my data, you don't have the right to have my data, I have the rights to take it or delete it. We've got consumer protection law. When I became the chief privacy officer at DoubleClick, here's how it happened. I opened up the newspaper one day, and here they are in trouble. Evidently, they're doing something with cookies. They're tracking people's web surfing. And that's not what the big story was about. The big story was that they had bought a data company, and they were going to link this offline data that they had about people to your online web browsing. So DoubleClick would know who you are. And people were shocked because people assumed you went online, you didn't give anybody your name. Whatever you searched, whatever sites you visited, you were anonymous. And every site promised you, we don't collect personal information, you are anonymous. And so we all felt quite comfortable. And all of a sudden, here's this company saying that no, it's going to actually know by name who we are as we move around on the web. And not only that, they're going to link other offline data about me that this co-op of catalog data, and companies will be able to send you ads based on that offline data. And this was shocking and surprising, and the Federal Trade Commission opened up an investigation. 17 attorneys general opened up investigations. Class action lawyers filed lawsuits, again, all under this consumer protection law. And so I called up my pal, former Schumer staffer, colleague of mine, who is working now at DoubleClick, and I said, well, you know, you got out of Schumer's office, which is a tough place to work. He's very hard-driven. The staff really work very hard, and you really got to be on all the time. It's a great learning experience, but you're working and you're learning. And here you are on the front page of the New York Times defending all this tracking. What are you all going to do about it? Well, we're going to hire a chief privacy officer. I said, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. What is that all about? And so when I became the first, one of the earlier chief privacy officers, I share for you here some of the nice headlines about, oh, here's this new role, and it's going to help people online and protect them. I didn't share some of the other headlines that said things like, what a weird .com kind of thing. They're calling some employees ninjas. They're calling others yahoos, privacy officers. This is really going to go, you know, the way the rest of the .com bus goes. But of course, today we've got hundreds of thousands of folks in this role. So I show up the first day, and I don't know all that much. I have some clue that cookies, you know, have something to do with data, and it might be on people's computers, but I hadn't yet sat down and gotten any briefing. I was a lawyer, you know, we had AOL accounts. This wasn't the day of people having email ubiquitously yet in their offices. And I get a call from the Washington Post, and they say, big problem. A technical expert told us that you've hidden web bugs on the White House website, and you're tracking kids who are coming to learn about how to stay away from drugs or more information about drugs. So you're tracking kids with drug abuse problems. What do you have to say about this? I'm like, well, that sounds kind of weird and strange. How could that be? I've signed up to work at this company. I think they do advertising. I don't know why we would be putting secret code on the White House site and tracking kids and drugs. And of course, what actually happened was the White House decided there's a drug czar, typically in Washington, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the drug czar, and they decided they would do this cool new thing. They'd advertise on the internet, because that's where the kids were, evidently, and they'd build a website to teach kids to stay away from drugs. I don't know who thought this would work, but they built this website, and they built it on a White House domain, because it was an official White House property, but the ad agency built it. And then, of course, they went off and they bought ads on Alta Vista and Lycos and AOL, all the big sites of yesteryear. And the agency folks said, listen, Here's what our best clients do. You're the government. You want to spend taxpayer dollars wisely, don't you? You want to know whether the AOL ads are driving responses, or is it the Lycos ads that are getting the response? Where are you paying and getting the best ROI? So we'll put some code that will help us give you reports. Okay, White House? Oh, sounds pretty good. So of course, a one-by-one tracking pixel is put on this marketing site that Ogilvy One, the ad agency, built just like it did for everybody else, but it's a White House site. And some technical expert spots the tracking pixel, and there I get the call. Before I had time to respond, the reporter said, we just got a call from the White House. And the White House says, that's terrible. They didn't know about it. And they're banning cookies on government websites. And I said, OK, I think that's probably going to create some technical problems. And half an hour, they call back. I hadn't yet figured out what we were going to say. They said, they just updated it. They evidently heard from some of the webmasters. And they're actually going to only block, they're going to have policy no third-party cookies. And then literally about half an hour goes by, and we got to update that because it turns out they even need some of these third-party cookies, but you're going to have to get permission of the agency head. So I thought, oh, what a good policy process. It happened very quickly. They'll still get to do it if they need to, but it's going to actually have to go through some level of review. But here's the mistake I made. I had worked in Congress, and I had worked as a state legislator. I had never worked in the major federal bureaucracies. And so here's how this played out for many years, right? Some webmaster's working on some new update to the web properties and decides he wants some analytics. And she somehow realizes, oh, there's a policy here. We got to get approval of the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of Energy, to do this. And she goes to her boss and says, well, when's our next meeting? He says, well, in 3 months, I meet with my boss, who will meet with the deputy, and we're going to try to get our budget and 2 major priorities approved. Could you actually get on that agenda something about cookies and tracking? And no, that's not going to happen, because that's what we'll be talking about, and we won't get our budget approved. So don't do it, or do what you want and don't tell me. And so for years, this was the policy until it was updated during the Obama administration. You technically needed the head of the agency or their senior report to approve it, and nobody did, and there'd be investigations by the GAO or the different auditors criticizing the agencies. Okay, so I'm putting this out there because I want you to start thinking about the way the government and the regulator policy process works and sets rules that govern how we use technology, and some of the rockiness and the nuances, and how we are going to have to do it better if we actually want to succeed in the world forward. Another couple of weeks go by, and this time it's the Wall Street Journal that calls, and they say, we just discovered that DoubleClick is running a Jack Daniels ad on Snoopy.com. I said, okay, and they're like, kids, Snoopy.com, you're running an alcohol ad on a kid's site, that's pretty bad. You're in big trouble, what do you have to say? I said, can I get back to you, please? And I call up the team that is handling that property for us, and I'm like, guys, how is it possible we have a policy against this? No alcohol on kids' sites, come on. And they said, what kid site? It's Snoopy. I'm like, yeah. They're like, 80, 90, we have the metrics. 89%, 90% of the people who go to Snoopy. Kids don't go to Snoopy. This is like an old school thing, right? This is people who grew up reading the comics. Kids are not. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to call this reporter back and somehow say, it's all good. Alcohol on Snoopy, it's okay because not really kids, and I actually have the numbers. No, they're going to kill me. We're going to look terrible. I know it's okay because the numbers say it's okay, but you know what? The best thing I can do is surrender quick, and this will be a one-day story. And so I say, well, it was terrible. It was a mistake, and we've put new measures in place, and we will not allow that sort of thing to happen again. And so here you have the beginnings of the development of the sophisticated policy processes that govern what happens. Okay, so today there are, because of the GDPR, the European Data Protection Regulation, which requires that many, many companies by law, have a data protection officer, an independent DPO who has to report in at the highest level of management and cannot easily be fired. So those of you who want real serious guaranteed legislative job protection, there are about 500,000 of these individuals that have been registered. Some of them can do the role. You can have outside consultants do it. So some of them may be doing it for multiple companies, but 500,000 registered with the EU regulators. The IAPP, the organization that many of us that work in privacy belong to, has 50,000 and is rapidly growing. And many of the leading legislative proposals at the state level, at the federal level, are saying, oh, if that's something useful, maybe we should regulate it. And so you're starting to see mandatory privacy and or even security designees showing up in the law. So nothing like a career that is guaranteed by legislation. And as we see these new privacy laws starting to pop up all across the US, many of them, almost as an afterthought, say, oh, we ought to add something about security in there. And so then there's 2 or 3 lines adding promises to have reasonable security or creating liability if there are data breaches. So we're in a really interesting transitional period today. So cookies, for me, kicked off my sort of awareness. So let me just walk through a little bit more before we move on to some of the other topics, how that has played out given the way that we all have handled the responses. So you see that triangle eye. So this is a little more sophisticated audience than perhaps the general one or others. Does anyone know, raise your hand, do you know what that triangle eye means when you see it? Not that many, hardly any. Has anyone seen it? Okay, so you've all seen this every single day that you've been on the internet, because this symbol is on almost every banner ad that you see, because it's the symbol that the industry years ago decided, let's tell people about all these cookies and that the ads are tracking them and retargeting them because people are saying it's creepy or it's invisible or it's not fair. And we've been talking about it in privacy policies, but since nobody's reading those, let's actually put it right out there on the page. And so it's actually on the corner of, well, just about every banner ad. Now, I didn't realize you could click only on the corner of an ad. I assume I click on an ad, I'm going to go to the advertiser's site. But if you somehow manage to click on the corner where you see that ad choices symbol, you will end up going to a page that tells you all about tracking and behavioral advertising. It'll tell you that you can take an opt-out cookie if you don't want this. Of course, the more technical people in this room are saying, yeah, but I clear my cookies all the time, so what's that opt-out cookie going to do for me? So maybe that doesn't work for you. But clearly, we didn't change the narrative, and as a result, in 2 years from a couple of weeks ago, Chrome is going to be blocking all third-party cookies. All the other major browsers do, because the consensus has been, oh my God, whatever is happening there behind the scenes is too aggressive, is too risky, is too privacy intrusive. All third-party cookies. So you want the analytics, you want your ad attribution, you want the things that are perhaps less privacy invasive than trading and selling your information. Nobody made the case to consumers, and the browsers responding and reacting end up blocking. Now look, I'm guilty too. I tried. When I was the Chief Privacy Officer at AOL, I said, I want to tell people about this. We're being criticized that we're doing some targeted advertising. I want to tell people so they understand that we're just trying to give them a better online experience. So we created a penguin. I can't recall why we thought a penguin was a good privacy icon. And we created some videos and some graphic comics. The penguin, he was worried about climate change even back then. He was reading about climate change. And then as he'd go from site to site, he'd start getting ads about anchovies and other things that we presume penguins liked. And you could see his ad profile being updated, linked to his cookie. But we clearly didn't succeed in changing the narrative. And then Do Not Track came along. We had an opportunity to negotiate with advocates and academics and civil society and come up with some sort of consensus where people simply with their browser could indicate, I don't want to be tracked. And nobody could agree what that really meant. Did that mean I could still do a little tracking so I can still have that analytics and that ad reporting? Or did it mean, no, you have nothing? Or does it mean I give you advertising, it's just not very targeted? And so unfortunately, the effort failed. The browsers, many of them, started pulling the do not track signal out because if people are using it and it does nothing, well, that's not a good deal. And so here we are at this place where we have legislators trying to fix this problem of too much advertising and data going too far. The browsers using sort of blunt technical methods to try to control it, and everybody else sort of swirling their arms. So can we do better? Can we do better? Because whether there's cookies or ads, advertisers will spend money online, life will move on, maybe we'll pay for some more things. That's not terrible if some of the newspapers actually get a couple of bucks from us so they can hire and pay reporters. I think it'll work out one way or another. I'm not quite sure that in all these other areas, microphones in our home, where every day we read stories about, is my smart TV spying on me? Is my smart home speaker spying on me? Is Siri spying on me? Drones, facial recognition, where we're seeing localities banned because of concerns that we don't have the right rules in place that can make sure that the technology is used in a reasonable way. Smart cities, cars, location, genetics, brain computer, almost every area of our life, we're going to be having these same debates. And if we mess up the way we messed up the debate and conversation around cookies, it's going to be worse. So we recently put out a paper where we tried to identify 10 of the technologies that we thought were really going to create the privacy challenges and stresses of next year's. So many of you probably only dealt with biometrics at a company if you really worked for a company that was doing something unique or different. But today, almost every organization in some way, whether it's scanning employees' fingerprints for locking in and out, you name it, there is biometrics of some sort. And I'll tell you the truth, who said that the only way we interact with the internet is typing on a keyboard? Not everybody can type on a keyboard. Not every device has a keyboard. And who said it's poking on sort of a little screen with our finger? Voice, gait, gesture, sound, brain-computer interfaces are starting to enter the market, starting to enter schools. Schools have been trying to figure out, how do we teach kids? And one leading education focus says kids have to come ready to learn. It doesn't matter how good the teacher is if a kid comes in and she's aggravated or not focused. So kids have to be in a learning mindset, in a growth mindset. Oh, so can we give them a little bit of a band to wear to test to see whether a little bit of meditation helps? There are apps in the App Store that come with a $100 banner that can already help you control things with your brainwaves. And some of that's super exciting, right? If I've got a disability and I can control my wheelchair, I can control a cursor, gaming, but this is starting to enter into every other part of our life. Facebook already owns a company that is a leader in brain-computer interfaces. So the challenge that we're going to have when these new user interfaces, which are important and valuable, but each a sensitive biometric, is going to make some of these debates that we've been having until now silly. Real-world evidence, right? Today, we go to the doctor knows what the doctor knows. The doctor says, are you following the diet I told you? There's information out there about how much you really are exercising and what you're eating. And today, if I'm a pharma company and I get a report that this drug caused an adverse event because I go to my doctor and it gets reported up the chain, then we learn that there's some bad side effects. But I might be out there yelling about it on Facebook, saying every time I take this, I throw up, or my cousin really got sick when this happened. There's a huge amount of information out there. And so the people who want real-world evidence, as they call it, to actually understand better how we improve patient outcomes or how we do research, but this means a lot of the data that is not covered by the traditional health privacy laws. The HIPAA health privacy law covers data that's collected when you are intersecting with your medical provider, when medical care is being provided, when insurance is being paid. But my social media data, pulled in and studied and analyzed. Social reputations, social credit, social scoring. Our bodies themselves are becoming part of the internet, right? We're wearing smart watches. We're wearing devices that have IP addresses, that have MAC addresses. So it's a challenging time, and I don't think we've seen anything yet. And we're going to have to figure out how to manage these social norms, right? At the end of the day, it's a social norm, right? Most of us figure out how, when something new comes on, how to behave, right? You learn that you don't type in all caps, that means you're yelling, right? But there's always somebody in the family who just doesn't seem to get it, right? Doesn't seem to understand the norms. And we can make fun of some of them, but my daughter thinks I'm a goofus on Instagram, even though I tell her I'm a huge influencer on LinkedIn. She says, that doesn't matter. You don't know how to use Instagram. You're posting like all these wordy things. I'm embarrassed, of you. You don't get the norm here. And so every time there's a new wave of technology, we get disrupted. When when portable cameras, you used to have to go and sit and have a portrait. So cameras weren't a risky thing. You went, you sat, it was a very formal thing, you put on your best. And then when the portable camera, when the brownies became available, and people could just take a picture of you in the street, it was shocking. There were efforts to ban these terribly intrusive things. And now you're in the locker room at your gym, and there's like people in the hot tub there with this HD thing that can stream, every naked thing that's there onto the internet, right? And we've kind of adjusted. We're not like, oh my God, right? Like, okay, they've got the phone, but they're not going to use it, even though it's, got that camera there. You remember when the Google Glasses came out and everybody was, mocking and critiquing. I don't know, in San Francisco, maybe it was a little bit more accepted around here, but, the rest of us around the world were like, who would wear that? What is that, right? And what seemed to be most annoying to people or most intrusive was the fact that they had this camera and maybe somebody would take a picture of you or stream, a video, and you didn't know about it, right? They weren't all that upset that maybe you were going to read your email while you were sitting in a cafe. It was like you might take pictures of them. And of course, it gets sort of laughed out of the market. But then Snapchat comes along with a teen audience, and they take what is the primary thing that everybody was freaking out about. This thing shoots video and it immediately uploads it, right? That's its only purpose for teens of all things. And everyone's like, oh, where do I get that? They're putting them in Times Square. They're putting them in vending machines in the Grand Canyon, and people are racing to try to get the first ones and paying $200 for them. And then it turns out that nobody even wants them, that it's dull and it's boring, and reportedly they have to destroy tens of thousands of them. So a number of years ago, a colleague of mine and I wrote a paper called A Theory of Creepy, Technology, Privacy, and Shifting Social Norms, where we tried to sort of put an intellectual and legal framework around this. So it's always cool to be published in a nice journal like the Yale Journal of Law and Technology. The downside is that Polonetsky and creepy came up very high in Google for many, many years. So being an authority on creepy has its pros and cons. So look, we're being challenged by some of these incredible opportunities, right? In almost every area of enterprise, of research, of life, we're seeing people truly enthusiastic about using data, not just to make advertising better, and not just to make the latest, delivery gimmick and the latest sort of, isn't that cool? No, real breakthroughs that matter to safety, to transportation, to medical care, to being able to provide better service at our cities. And so getting this right, the stakes are really high. Every policy issue, every stress in society seems to be playing out on digital platforms right now, and every privacy or civil rights leader or person worried about policy in the world, when you say that proposal you have is going to limit innovation, you get laughed out of the room, because to them, innovation means, well, don't regulate me, because I got to make money with this, and I don't even know what the downsides are, but it's a new way to make money, and so it ought to be okay, right? And they're like, no, no, no. What are you doing for society, and what downsides are you bringing along with it? That's our framework. These are civil rights issues, and that changes the dynamic in a really significant way. So how are we fixing it? What's happening in terms of legislation in the US? We talked about it, how it's really a civil rights issue in many ways. How am I treating people differently based on data that reflects who they are? We talked about the stress of social norms. Can government access and get this data? Are corporations having too much power over individuals because of how much data they have? Are foreign countries interfering in our elections? Are automated decisions being made where I'll be turned down for health care, I'll be turned down for insurance, my probation will be extended? So these are not privacy issues, right? These are issues of power. These are issues of human rights at the end of the day. Okay, so how should we regulate human rights, right? It obviously shouldn't be just like icons on ads. Well, what are we doing? We're trying to move away from this consumer protection law. I can do anything I want as long as I don't deceive you or really harm you. Otherwise, it goes. Okay, we're moving away. So here in California, we have one of the leading new consumer privacy laws, and it primarily gives you the right to see, download, access, and tell companies to delete it and not to sell it. So if I go to the thousands and thousands and thousands of sites that I have been to, and the thousands and thousands of businesses that I have dealt with, and then all the others that I don't even know I dealt with because they're there behind the scenes, they're third-party data companies, if I somehow find them, I can spend an awful lot of time telling them all to not sell my data and telling them to delete it. So Professor Daniel Solove, one of the leading privacy academics, one of the most published and respected authors, in an article he put out just a couple weeks ago called The Myth of the Privacy Paradox, points to all these new consumer privacy laws, CCPAs, state after state, is replicating this California Act as sort of the new model. Can we do better? Well, let's look to Europe. The Europeans are serious about privacy. They passed more than 2 years ago what is considered the gold standard of privacy laws, the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. Let me point out that privacy doesn't appear in the text of that statute, and it's considered the most important privacy law. It's a data protection law because it actually seeks to protect all of the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed at the European constitutional level, their Charter of Human Rights. So of course privacy is in there, but so is freedom of speech and freedom of movement and all of the other constitutional level rights. And this is what is influencing companies around the world, and this is why it's considered a human rights law, because it's actually not solely about protecting the data, it's about protecting all of the values that intersect when data is the crux, when data prevents it, when data creates it, when data makes it worse. So what's our model? We have these opt-out laws sort of popping up around the country. We have a Washington State privacy proposal that tries to go a little bit further than this opt-out model, including some of the GDPR concepts. The federal government is trying to figure out how to handle it slowly. Maybe technology can play a bit of a role if technology has been part of the problem. So I'm optimistic that with more sophisticated de-identification, we're seeing real advances in differential privacy, in homomorphic encryption, different models of federated learning, where the data stays on your device, where mathematically we've got guarantees that are much stronger that might help us get the utility that we want of the data, the analysis and the research, but without actually having data about any individual. That's an exciting path forward. We're seeing more data being handled locally. Keep it on your phone instead of sending it to the cloud, and yet we can give you sophisticated tools. We can give you sophisticated analysis. We're seeing synthetic data. We're seeing small data instead of big data being needed to power machine learning. So I'm optimistic that we need law, but that we can, in large part, if we are careful about supporting and following some of these tech trends and lean into them, solve some of our challenges. So how do we make sure that legislators understand this when they're still trying to figure out how to deal with cookies on the government websites? We need to help legislators understand the technical nuts and bolts, not to code, not to write scripts. We need them understanding enough because they are going to be regulating machine learning, and they're not going to become machine learning experts. They need the staffers. We need to support efforts to give them the staff who have the tech chops. But all of us who work in these areas need to spend the time being the translator of here's what might matter to you if you're looking to solve these problems. Let me simply tell you how it works so you can make better decisions. Another area that we need to figure out how to deal with, if I have data in my home, right? If I have a letter, if I have information sitting on my computer, it's protected under the Constitution. Things that are on my body, things that are in my home, my letters, the government wants it, it needs a warrant. Lots of that data, however, that used to only be in our home, in a letter, or an email that I downloaded and wasn't sitting on some server elsewhere, is now sitting on cloud, is sitting in other companies' computers, is sitting everywhere and anywhere around the world. And very often, therefore, not subject to that same protection. A lawyer might be able to get it simply with a subpoena because they're suing somebody or suing you. The Supreme Court might be helping us a little bit. A recent case called Carpenter, where we saw the justices appreciating that data that was outside cell tower location data was so intimate that it actually needed a higher level of protection. So I'm optimistic. We'll see how the court goes. But there is at least some hope that justices that use cell phones get the intimacy and the idea that the protection ought not to be dependent simply on whether this is in my home or sitting on someone else's computer. What else can we do? Well, if we want to actually understand what's going on at some of these companies, do we ask them for good reports? Hey, are you helping with traffic ride-sharing company? Give us a report. Hey, healthcare data, can you just give me a report? We need independent academics. Did foreign countries interfere and use social media in ways? Hey, company, give us a report. No, we want independent academics having access to be able to study and analyze and research and use that data for the benefit of society. So we need models where they can share it in a responsible way that protects privacy, that has the adequate de-identification, that goes through an ethics review. Today, if I'm an academic and I do a study, and I'm at a university, I'm doing something that's federally funded, I've got to go through an independent review board that says, well, did you get the proper permission? Is there some risk here? Is what you're doing likely to be helpful? Is it going to harm the people who are part of the experiment? But what if I'm a company and I'm doing that same research? Or I'm an academic and I'm working with corporate data and it's not a federally funded project? I don't have that same review process. We need those done in a credible way so that we can rely that these sorts of things get vetted. And then, can we actually put the lawyers aside for a second and even the tech and security people aside and bring in some of the UI and the human-computer interface and the design people? An academic recently did a wonderful paper where she said, hey, let's take the nutrition label and let's do the way a privacy notice would be done if we let the privacy people write this, right? And I'll just point out one or two. And if you've read privacy policies, they'll remind you how useless this is, right? Like most snack suppliers, we may include sweetness to enhance your experience with the help of our trusted partners. We only include as much sodium as is necessary to keep providing our product to you, right? What am I going to do with that? That's what we're doing when it comes to privacy policies. The nutrition label obviously did a little bit better. Can we have the people who actually work hard at working to make sure humans understand what we're communicating in the room so that we actually can do better? So educate policymakers, contribute to these codes and best practices. That's setting norms. Right? Let's put some of those rules in place. I was doing some research recently. My father had colon cancer. So I'm at high risk, family history. So I was reading about a new test that you can take, and you don't have to go in and do the whole colonoscopy, but is it accurate enough? What are the false positives? So I'm reading about it on the site of the company that makes this. And then you know what I see? I see that triangle eye. And I know what that means. That means they're going to be retargeting me on other websites. They're labeling me as interested in colon cancer, maybe somebody who is at risk. I don't know. And that will be used. There'll be a profile of me, and anywhere I go, the company that wants to target me is going to be sharing that with other third parties, right? Because they're not in the ad business; they're in the, cancer test business. So they're going to be sharing it with their ad tech company, who's going to be selling it in a data place. So also that someone can find me and remind me to maybe come back to the site and transact, right? Draw some boundaries that say some of these things go too far, so that we set some social norms so that companies understand the boundaries, in addition to obviously having serious legislation. The issues are more than privacy, so don't talk just to us privacy people. Talk to people who worry about low-income issues. Talk to people who represent immigrants. Talk to people who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds of different ethnicities, because they're going to see issues and concerns that maybe you don't, and it is those issues that are going to bring down any of the progress if you don't think it through and actually solve those problems. And then this last one is probably something that I think security people get, because you get that there's lots of bad people out there, and anything they see, they will use to try to get in the door. And that's part of life. Us privacy people, we're a little bit more naive. Somebody comes and says, here's what this product does, right? It's going to help you do this. It's going to help you get delivery. It's going to, help you this and that. We're like, oh, okay. And then we analyze it. And we don't say, yeah, but how's someone going to mess with this to do something discriminatory? How is this algorithm somehow going to be optimized so that women don't get to see X or Y or Z? Are we ethically hacking those same consumer-facing tools? Because someone will ethically hack it and show that here's what you're doing in a way that isn't fair and isn't equitable. So do that red team, that white hat, ethical privacy hacking. Let's learn a bit from the security community. I grew up in Coney Island. I was the state legislator for that area. This is the Cyclone. It's the classic roller coaster from those days. It's like a wooden roller coaster. It's very scary. It's going to be a wild ride because these issues are messy. And guess what? We haven't figured them out in the rest of life. There's no way we're going to solve them easily online. We haven't figured out the balance of free speech. We haven't figured out what is and what isn't the right discrimination. When am I discriminating in a positive way? When is it a negative way? Who gets protected? When is it relevant to treat people differently? When is it economic? We haven't solved these problems elsewhere. It's messy. It's different in every country. It's going to be messy and comfortable and uncomfortable and hard, but we have no choice. And if you're an optimist like I am about what can be done with tech and data, hang on for the ride. Love to take some questions. At the Future Privacy Forum, we work with the chief privacy officers of about 200 companies, as well as with academics and civil society and foundations. We're optimistic about what can be done with tech and data, but we think we get to those good things if we have the rules, the norms, the protections in place. Otherwise, we end up swirling. We'll ban things, we'll regulate things, we'll limit things. Some of them should be banned and regulated and limited, but we'll go slower in areas where we can go fast, and we will we'll miss out on the kinds of opportunities that I think we all want to see. With a question, anybody can come up to the microphone, and happy to talk about any of the privacy issues, data issues, legislative issues, anything that is on your mind. Yes, please.
You talked about the DPO role for thank you, GDPR, microphone nerves here. Is there some level of certification or something that one needs to achieve or look for if one is hiring from the outside for that role?
So this is a fairly novel, formal role. In Germany and some other places in the world, this isn't that new. There have been obligations to have a DPO. Not every company needs one. You've got to do sort of large-scale, high-risk processing. So if you're maybe a small business, you may not need to, but many kinds of activities fall under. And a lot of other companies have said, you know what, maybe if I can afford to have this role, I ought to, even if technically what I do isn't high-risk processing. So number one, you don't today have to have any certification. You can hire anybody and anybody. Now, that's not a very good idea to hire anybody and anybody. There are efforts in Europe, which takes certification very seriously, to create formal certification programs. There are some informal ones now, Maastricht or a few places. The IAPP, which isn't certifying DPOs, but certifies privacy professionals, has a host of programs and training and tests you can take. I don't think we'll create the same role in the US. In Europe, this is an independent person. So again, great that you can't be fired, but you're also not the person actually doing the work, counseling on the product. You're almost sort of like an independent auditor who's there, but you've got to keep some distance. The chief privacy officers, the legal privacy leads, I think what we expect in the US is, I want to put somebody who's going to be hands-on, who actually is handling the access request. And if I say, I cannot give you access because I don't have a good way to identify you, I have only your cookie, so I shouldn't give you all the sensitive information I have about you, I maybe want that counselor playing that role. So I think we'll more likely have certified privacy professionals who have qualified training. Europe cares deeply about what I'll call individual redress. So one of the biggest issues in the US in this debate about privacy law is, are you going to get to sue companies? Is it only the FTC? Is it only these consumer regulators who get to stick up for you? If you write to the FTC today and you say, I got ripped off, they took my data, they stole my money, blah, 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 the FTC has no obligation to call you back and say, wait, what, can we investigate? If they hear a lot of complaints, they might take action against this company. In Europe, people need, under the European legal system, the right to go to the DPA, to go to the DPO, the Data Protection Authority, and say, my rights were violated, what are you going to do about it? And someone has to see, review, they can turn it down, but they've got to review it. So we're probably going to evolve in a different model. Hopefully that gives you a little information.
An earlier keynote speaker said that the BTK serial killer case was solved, this was probably a decade ago, from using the results of a test performed on the guy's daughter. Does HIPAA, they had a warrant, does HIPAA allow that? Can the test results of your relatives be used against you?
So HIPAA only helps protect the data that you give up when you go to the doctor, when you go and submit a lab test that was ordered by your doctor, when you're in the hospital. It's very limited. The goal was to make sure you weren't nervous about giving your doctor information, and that the medical system could easily zoom your data all throughout the medical system. Boom, it goes to insurance. You go to another specialist, it's a pain in the neck, but they can easily transfer it. So that's all that HIPAA does. We don't have currently privacy protection for all that other data. We have bank laws that protect your banking data. We have credit laws that protect your credit data. Your genetic data is protected in some limited ways. So your employer cannot say to you, you want a job? Let me have a genetic test. Let's see how smart your genes say you are. Oh, let's see if you've got any symptoms of significant illnesses that might make it, very expensive or blah, blah, blah. I can't fire you. I can't turn you down for health insurance. The genetics issue ends up being really interesting. Here's what happens, right? There are a number of open genetics databases, right? The genealogists of the world, the people who are researching their ancestry, have been loading their data up to these open databases, and they're finding long-lost relatives, and it's all very exciting. And then the cops are like, that's kind of cool. We can go there just like any other researcher, and if we have a little bit of evidence, we can use this to find maybe somebody who's, 2, 3 relatives away, and all of a sudden we have a lot of information and we can start visiting people's cousins and relatives and uncles, and a number of cases have been cracked because of these open databases, but a lot of other people are like, wait a second, I'm in this possible police dragnet because my second cousin 3 times removed loaded their data and there's some relationship to my data. So the one big open database has pulled back some of their information. The Justice Department has put some rules in place where they won't pretend to be somebody, but we absolutely need a comprehensive privacy law that gives us guarantees. Now here's the challenge. Most of these privacy laws aren't telling the government what to do. They're telling companies what to do. And the government isn't super eager to show up, the cops, the sheriffs, law enforcement, and see their opportunity to get data limited. So that's going to be a really hard challenge. Angelique.
You mentioned earlier that Europe's law, the GDPR, is really the gold standard. Now that it's been operationalized for almost a couple of years, did Europe get it right, or are there pitfalls we should be looking for as we try and craft a federal law here in the US?
I think there are things we can learn from what the Europeans did. The GDPR has a lot of sophistication and nuance in it. The core point is you can't collect any data unless you have one of 6 legal bases to collect data. If not, it's illegal, right? Here, we're kind of like, of course you can do it, just don't do anything wrong. Or what rules do I need to follow? Or maybe I would ask permission before I send you email. The GDPR says, sorry, you don't get to collect data unless you have a legal basis to do so. And each legal basis comes with different nuanced set of rules. If it's consent, which is only allowed when it really is true and fair consent. So let me share with you an inside data protection privacy geek joke, okay? And this is a true story. A leading consulting firm asked its employees, it wanted to pay them and process benefits, nothing special. It asked them for consent to use their data. So in Europe, this room would be howling because it's well known that you can't ask employees for permission. Of course, they're going to not get paid? No, it doesn't mean you can't use the data, but the set of legal bases that you use is a very different one that comes with different rights. So each one, consent, contract, legitimate interest, comes with certain, I can delete it, in some places I can revoke it. In the US, we're rushing. It took them 7 years to nuance the GDPR and to balance these rights. And we're rushing quickly to get it in place, and we're doing things that are sometimes very blunt. So for instance, we want to give people access to data, right? It's their data, they should have access to it. But of course, I need to authenticate you, because otherwise you're creating a security breach that's going to get you in trouble. Well, here's the messy thing. There's lots of data I have about people that is kind of messy. It's not great. I probably can't authenticate you. Maybe it's about your household because I'm mailing things to your house. It's not perfect, but guess what? For a marketer, it's better than random, so they do it, right? There's data tied to your cookies or the NIDs of your phone. How do I properly balance? Well, they've been dealing with this in Europe for many years, and they understand that you have rights, but at the same time, if it's going to impinge the privacy of others, if it's going to create a security risk, then you have the right to turn that down. And so we're muddling our way, and I think there's a lot we can learn. One area where I hope Europe will nuance, so the Europeans last week, the president of the European Commission said, we lost to the big global companies, the Chinese companies, the American companies, when it comes to the direct-to-consumer data. We can't lose. We've got to have our own digital champions for the next generation, which is machine learning and AI. So we're going to come up with a regulated model because everyone knows that if AI is not trusted, it's terrible, it's scary, we'll have killer robots, we'll have discriminatory things. We're going to lead the world by setting a regulated system for trusted AI, and that's how Europe will lead. And we're going to have high risk and we're going to have low risk. And if you're in the high-risk category, and it's not clear fully exactly what ends up in there, you may need to come and pre-approve your technologies before they can get to the market. That's a challenge, right? You certainly want laws that say you can't do stuff wrong, but the idea of maybe submitting your technology for government review is probably a slower process and more restrictive than we're likely to want to see in the US. So I think there's a lot we can learn and some good lessons, but I think we would like to build on what they did and keep a little bit of the speed, not the move fast and break stuff, but move fast, think hard, get things done so we get products in the market.
Hey, so one of the things I've been thinking about is every time I interact with anything, like let's say I go get a haircut, they now know that I got a haircut. And so
who's the they?
Like the barber, for example. So everyone I interact with, everyone I transact with, even friends that would take a photo and they have that photo, what does the privacy community think about the fact that I might not be the one giving away my data, but every time I transact, I have to, at the very least, tell the other party that I'm transacting with them.
Yeah, so here's,
they could give
again,
that
here's where the Europeans got it right. They don't say it's about, is the data public, or did someone else have it? It doesn't matter. before someone can use data, whoever they are, your barber, your friend, your neighbor, they need a legitimate basis to do what they want to do with it. So your barber maybe needs to send you an email saying a month went by, or hey, you didn't pay me, or here's the bill, or whatever. Well, that's a pretty legitimate thing. He's got the right to do it. Can your barber take a database of, let's see, my people, here's their ethnicity, here's their height, oh, this one looks wealthy, this one pays with this kind of credit card, and then sell it to a data broker? Wait a second, what exactly is their basis for doing that? They probably don't have a good basis for doing that. So the Europeans actually have a thoughtful model. We in the US are sort of saying, it's all opt-in or all opt-out. Obviously, there's some data that needs to be shared for certain legitimate purposes to move transactions. So we're trying to think of every purpose and creating lists and saying, these, you always need permission, or you always get an opt-out, but not security. Okay, but not research. Oh, but not marketing. Okay, but some marketing, right? And that's not a way to legislate, right? Because we're going to miss something. We're going to miss including something that's a problem, or we're going to open up a hole that's going to let stuff that we don't want happen. So hopefully that's an answer. Anyway, how am I on time? I am at time. So thank you so much for being a great audience, and thank you for your attention.